Good evening, Reston, and good evening wherever else you might be seeing this program. This is Reston Impact. This is the last show we'll be doing. You'll probably be seeing this on YouTube. They're closing up shop here in Reston, Comcast Community Television. So we could have a separate program on why community television is going away in this community, but that's another issue. This evening, we're going to close out with my favorite special guest. The absolutely appropriate thing to do on the closeout show, and that's Dr. Lawrence Korb from the Center for American Progress. He's a senior fellow for National Security Affairs at the Center for American Progress. He's also been Assistant Secretary of Defense for 4 years?
4.5 years, yeah.
4.5 years under President Reagan. And more importantly than anything else, he's a former Reston resident, so you know he's a good man. Larry, always good to see you, sir.
Nice to be with you, and I'm flattered that it is to be on your last program. I'm sorry it is the last program, and I'm flattered to be part of it.
I'm an old guy. It's 18 years. I have to thank the guys at Comcast. It's been a good run, and they've been very good to me. It's a scary world we live in today, and I was hoping you could tell us this evening that the outlook ahead is for a more stable, more peaceful place. But I don't see that in your eyes, and I'm afraid I may not hear that tonight. But anyway, I'd like to talk with you. You have incredibly broad experience in the public policy world, in the world of thinkers and teachers and schools, and a great deal of experience. And you've been somebody who's been consulted by, I think it's fair to say, world leaders as well as U.S. leaders for many years now. You're an old guy too, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's true.
But I think it would be interesting if you could help summarize what you see as the lay of the land, national security-wise, under Donald Trump at the present time, and what you think is out there in the medium, short-term to medium-term future, the risks, the challenges, and we can talk about some specific areas, but kind of an overview.
Well, Trump does some good things. The problem is you don't have an overall strategy to see where he wants to go. For example, he wants to have good relations with the Russians.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, one of the things he could do with the Russians is extend the New START arms control agreement that limits the number of intercontinental nuclear weapons that both sides have. It expires in 2021. This was something that President Obama negotiated in 2010. And it can be extended for 5 years without going back to the Congress.
Intermediate range.
No, these are not the intermediate. These are intercontinental. These are the
ICBM.
ones. Okay. ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, long-range bombers. Okay, those are the ones that we can hit the Soviet or the Russia. They can hit us, or we could use them against China. Now, I'll get to the intermediate in a second. We could extend that, and President Putin has asked to extend it. It expires in February 2021. President Trump has not. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Has he taken a public position on it?
He has just ignored Putin. He keeps saying, some of his people say, well, we got to have a different type of negotiations. We got to bring the Chinese in. Those are valid points. But why not extend it for 5 years and then you can work on these things?
Right.
But if that expires, then there's no limit.
There's no framework anymore.
Yeah. And similarly with the intermediate nuclear forces in Europe, which I had the privilege of serving President Reagan and Gorbachev negotiated. They got rid of all of them in Europe. The Russians have begun to push the envelope by testing new intermediate.
Can you tell us what an intermediate range is?
Okay, intermediate basically, the treaty is 500 to 5,000 kilometers, okay? And if you put that in, miles, it's like 300,
3,000.
Yeah. Basically, these are weapons that would be used in the European continent.
Theater.
Yeah, the European theater. So we got rid of all of them, okay? And that's the first time. Do you realize we
got rid of all of them?
Right. We destroyed several thousand of them.
And the Russians did.
We both did.
And this had verification, so
Oh, yeah.
we know it was done.
Yeah, now the Russians have begun to push the envelope a little bit by testing some weapons. We have done something, we put in, in Poland and Romania, anti-ballistic missile systems, which could be used to launch, intermediate weapons. So there was
So we say they're anti-ballistic missile systems, but in fact, the same systems could launch.
That's what the Russians feel. Now, there's no doubt about the fact that a treaty that was signed in 1987 needed to be updated.
That happens.
Rather than updating it, getting back with the Russians, we just got out.
Now, this is another thing that, like the climate agreement that Trump just said, we're getting out.
We're getting out.
It's done.
Okay. And
And his grounds being presumably because the Russians are violating it.
That's right. The real question is, okay, now what?
Right.
Are you going to build more intermediate? And in his budget this year, there is money to build new intermediate nuclear weapons. The Democrats in the House have taken it out. The Republicans in the Senate have kept it in, and they haven't negotiated an agreement. And so the fiscal year started, we don't have a defense budget.
But here you go, you're setting the stage for a race, a nuclear race in the intermediate range.
You could have an intermediate and an intercontinental arms race.
And
again.
you've got the Crimea, you've got the Ukraine situation with the Russians, with armed combatants in the field. You've got some things that could be triggers for that kind of a weapon.
Right.
Now, are these smaller, less destructive weapons, or is it just the range at which
Just
they
the
can be-
range.
Just the range at which they can be
You raise
delivered?
an important point, because a lot of people say, well, let's build small nuclear weapons. Once you cross that threshold, there's no such thing. And this whole idea that, well, if we had small ones, we could use them and then not have an all-out nuclear war. If somebody...
Then they couldn't justify hitting us with a bigger one. That sounds like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good luck with that argument.
Yeah, and so that's something that really needs to be dealt with. And President Trump has not helped it by, not extending the New START and
I'm curious about this. This seems like a natural for the right side of the party, the John Boltons of this world. Of course, he's gone now, but why? Any idea what the thinking is behind? It's just
Well,
not important to him, or he doesn't want to offend Vladimir, or what?
No, he would help Vladimir. Vladimir was the one who suggested extending it. Bolton, when he was there, he doesn't like any arms control agreements. When he would work for the second President Bush, he got us out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. He convinced Trump to get out of the nuclear deal with Iran, to get out of the intermediate nuclear forces, agreement. So he doesn't like any arms agreement.
And the rationale again being, you can't trust the other side, so we've got to go for our defense first and be prepared because the bastards will cheat every time.
Yeah, and
I mean,
that's
otherwise, why would you do it? It spends money. It has potential to do horrible things to mankind that are beyond the realm.
well, if you go back and you take a look, when we started negotiating with the then Soviet Union, it was like 1969. And the Cold War was still raging, but
Right.
everybody realized that nuclear weapons were so critical, they had to be dealt with. And,
It was just unthinkable that we could actually employ those and the impacts, the devastation, and the likelihood that even the policymakers would escape what would come.
right, and we had, during the Cold War, we were lucky, there were a lot of false alarms where people said, hey, there's a nuclear weapon on
On the way.
Yeah, on the way, and it turned out to be a mistake. But we had both Soviets or Russians and Americans who deserve an awful lot of credit for not overreacting and say, well, let me check, let me make sure. And
Didn't we also put in place, and I recall this going back to John Kennedy, like maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis was the trigger, but the installation of communication systems and tripwires, so that I recall a big to-do about a phone in the office of the Premier of the Soviet Union and the President's office here, a red line, so that
that's right. We put that in after the Cuban Missile Crisis. And after that, President Kennedy came out and supported a test ban treaty to stop testing nuclear weapons.
Right.
Okay, because if you can't test them, then you shouldn't, be modernizing them. So that helped. But, President Nixon deserves an awful lot of credit for getting the first reduction in offensive long-range weapons and in getting an anti-ballistic missile treaty.
I didn't think I'd ever miss Nixon, but somehow these days I miss Nixon.
Well, as some people have said, he was our last liberal president. He had the EPA, OSHA. He had a health care plan that was more radical than we're talking
He
about.
reopened China?
I'm hoping that things too
Yeah.
would shine. In fact, Ted Kennedy, before he died, said I should have worked with him. Didn't want the Republicans to get credit for it, but much more dramatic than the one that Obama was able to get through.
Yeah, interesting thing. What's the other part? What's this open skies? This is kind of connected.
With open,
Something you've written about recently.
Yeah, I mean, the open skies, treaty basically was, put in, and we just got out of it for no good reason.
But it wasn't just that one. Wasn't just us and the Russians. It was 35 or 40.
That's right, and basically
countries.
what it was, they were
European countries and Canada and the U.S.
Right, that's
okay.
right. There were 35 countries signed it, and basically what it said, and this Eisenhower first proposed this. Let's make sure.
You keep coming up with these Republican names where they did good things.
Obama was the only Democrat to get an arms control agreement. They were all other Russians, and politically that helps. Because if Reagan gets it, how are you going to say he's soft on, Russia? And
that was also always the leg up they had. That's right.
Well,
anyway.
Basically what it said, and it was culminated by George H.W. Bush.
This is the open skies.
The open skies. It says, if you give a notice, you can check out another fly over the other country and see what's going on here.
So a Russian plane could fly over our facilities in Kansas,
right.
And
we had one within the last year fly over the White House.
But I mean, they can fly halfway. They can fly across the country. In fact.
Right. That's right.
And we could do the same.
Right. Now, the Russians did. They put in some restrictions, and then we put it. In other words, they said you can't. They didn't want us going over Kaliningrad, which, if you know, is up near in the Baltics,
right.
and everything. And then we said, okay, you can't come to Hawaii. Okay, but we had 4 times as many flights than they did, and we're an open society. We don't hide.
Well, I was going to say the advantage is clearly to our
right.
advantage,
right?
Because we are an open society.
That's right.
They probably got their commercial airliners flying
right.
over the place
now,
all this time.
The good news is they haven't formally done it. What happened is Bolton, right before he left, had written something for the president, which, of course, in our society, everything leaks. So now we know. So there's been a lot of pushback from members of the Senate on both parties. So we'll just have to see what happens.
But this is part of the framework. I guess when I wanted to include that, and you actually sent me a piece that you'd written on it, where I got so I could ask you these questions. But you got the intermediate range nuclear weapons, you got the ICBMs, you got the where do these systems for early warning fit in? Is that part of the framework? Are there treaties that govern this? That having the militaries work together, the phones in the president's offices?
Okay, well, you have basically, a hotline between the
and that's still in existence.
Yeah, and we still use it. For example, we use it in Syria because the Russians are there.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, we were there, and we say, hey, we're going to be flying here to attack this, and we said, no, we're going to attack that. So we get warning. We don't.
So accidents don't happen.
Yeah, we don't directly attack each other, but it is important because you don't want to have an accident. Now, we did kill several hundred Russian mercenaries in Syria, and but so far this has helped because the last thing you want is a shootout between 2 nuclear powers.
Right. Okay, but you've got the other thing sort of collapsing around us, the framework for keeping nuclear weapons at bay, for reducing their numbers, barring their use, for having inspections, the controls that everybody is rightly concerned about in this game, because people like to cheat when it comes to military
Well,
affairs.
under
Take a leg up.
under the New START agreement, we and the Russians can both expect nuclear facilities on the other side. I'm not just talking about open skies flying a plane, I'm talking about people showing up.
Showing up.
And basically, there's been no complaints that the Russians have kept us from checking every time we've asked.
It's interesting. They're in fact working. Is that still in place? Is that?
Yeah, it's still in place. What I worry about, it expires in February 2021. And so if you get a new administration in there, they're going to have a month to do this, and so, and again, I don't know why President Trump doesn't do it. I mean, his buddy Putin wants it, everybody would be happy, but
Yeah.
the people he had around him, particularly John Bolton, they don't like any arms agreements.
So that's a pretty frightening set of prospects.
Right. And then they're arguing.
And again, it fits in with your earlier statement that there's not a strategic framework for where this president's going.
Right. And on the subject of nuclear weapons, the most dangerous thing in the Middle East is to have a nuclear arms race between the Saudis and the Iranians and their proxies. And
How about the Israelis?
pardon?
How about the Israelis?
Well, the Israelis already have them, okay?
Yeah, I know.
But
Oh, I see, to get weapons in the first place.
yeah, right, okay. But basically, this would be, if you will, between the Sunnis and the Shias.
Right.
Now, when we got the arms control agreement with President Obama got with the Iranians, all right, to slow down their nuclear weapon, and of course, as part of it, they renounced that they would ever get them. People said, well, but you're not stopping the Iranian behavior, in Yemen or Syria.
Supporting
and all, okay.
some armed groups and this kind of thing.
But we never did. After we made the agreements with the Soviets, they went into Afghanistan. So this whole idea of, or they put down their...
That wasn't part of the other packages either.
No, I mean,
Of course it
you
wasn't.
got to separate them. And, basically, now the Iranians are moving somewhat closer to it, and because we put the sanctions back on, and they're saying, hey, we made this deal so you could help our economy.
That is so important. I don't know I guess it's out there in the media, but I don't know if people fully understand, not only did we pull out of that treaty, but we have gone back to this status quo ante by putting the sanctions back on, taking away the reasons for the Iranians to be involved in the treaty in the first place.
That's right. And remember, this was not just a treaty with us.
So we tried to blow up the treaty as well as pulling out.
Yeah. It's not just us. It's Chinese, the Russians, the Europeans are all part of this. Now,
Right.
they've been trying to continue to, purchase Iranian oil, but we control the banking system, so it's very hard.
Yeah. So we're coming down on even our allies' ability to continue to implement that.
Right.
It's the most destructive, and it's so typical of this administration. Let's go the extra mile and do as much damage as we possibly can, as opposed to walking away from something saying, okay, that's no longer in the United States' interest.
No, Trump is saying, I can get a better deal.
Yeah.
Because again, is it a perfect deal? No, there's not a perfect deal. There are things about how
Well,
much
and he's the master of the deal.
Yeah, so we're going to get a better deal. And how are we going to get it? We're going to put maximum pressure on Iran. Okay, and what happens if that doesn't work? I mean, and that's the problem. And that's where you need a strategy. Okay, I'm doing this because I want to get this done. Well, okay, how does it work if you don't get it done, and what are the chances? And that's what, you have to...
Well, you're playing a game of chicken, it seems to me, because on the other side, the Iranians are saying, okay, then we can start to do a little bit of stuff, and we can start to build in that direction. But at some point, that's going to get everybody is going to jump ship on the agreement, and they're going to find that the sanctions regime is going to be worse than it was before.
Right.
So there's a bad prospect there for them.
Right, and if they go nuclear, the Saudis will. And, they're a wealthy country, and so they can do it. And this is what I mean, when you have to have your strategy, because obviously there's a lot of unrest in the Middle East and a lot of things going on. But the fact of the matter is, a nuclear arms race between those two, that would be devastating.
Yeah.
Not just to that region, but to the world.
Absolutely would be. And I think of the Pakistanis out on one edge, and I cannot help it, but the Israelis are over there, and who knows? Netanyahu goes to jail, who knows what happens there. But okay, so that's one. The outlook on that, any thoughts as to what can put this back on track, that is some kind of framework for controlling the growth, the spread, the application of nuclear weapons?
Well, again, I think we can get, what I would suggest is drop a couple of the sanctions, get the Iranians back to the table, and then, if you can come up with some face-saving thing that really is not that substantial. But
I'm talking about the larger picture.
Oh, well,
the
the
ICBMs,
larger, I
intermediate.
mean, the larger picture in there is basically, we've got to stop giving the Saudis a blank check to do what they want, because we have influence with them. And they...
Yeah, but they're providing money to the family and things like that, I think,
Well, I have to leave those things aside, but, in other words, you tell them, stop aiding, with aiding the people in Yemen, okay, because that's a corrupt government, and you're going to have to come up with some solution. Now, they are beginning to move a little bit in that direction, but, that's one conflict that, we can help diffuse.
Your skittishness on that, because that's sort of outside your realm, what the likelihood that there might be some bad ethical violations or something. That normally would be true. You shouldn't, there's no need to deal with that. But it's part and parcel to this president. It's from the group of 7 having to come to his estate, his resort in Florida, until he got called on that because somebody's over here talking about impeaching him. But he really, his businesses are part of his presidency.
No doubt about it. I mean, look at Turkey. Why in the heck would you want to cozy up to Erdogan, who, the president of Turkey, who is a horrible person, who has committed war crimes, other than the fact, that you have some sort of, you or your son-in-law has some sort of business relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
1,500 people just stay in his properties from our government. 125 or 30 from foreign governments so far. I mean, they're running counts of these. I mean, the guy is making just lots and lots and lots of money. And it's when you mix that in, and you've already presented to us a very nasty brew with lots of danger to it. But you mix that in, and it gets really hard to calculate and arrange solutions if somebody's got personal agendas operating as well. I don't think I've seen that before.
No, I think President Trump is unique in the sense of
Yeah.
no prior government experience, no real strategy, and then, of course, not diverting himself from his business.
Mixing his own businesses and his family's business. I've never seen that. And I don't know that we come up against that kind of thing in the people we deal with in the world. Not to my knowledge, but I may be wrong about that. Specifics. At the top of the newspaper front pages these days is Ukraine and the presidency as part of the impeachment imbroglio. And I won't take you down the impeachment track, but let's talk about Ukraine. We've ceded Crimea to the Russians, pretty much, if I understand things. You've still got a hot war in the eastern part of Ukraine, and they're still under real threat from the Russians. I think the Russians will benefit by the phone call conversations that Trump's been having, saying, I don't give a shit about Ukraine.
Here's the thing. Both parties recognize that we've got to do something to prevent the Russians from continuing to control Ukraine. And that's why they passed this very, very substantial foreign aid package, okay? Foreign and military aid, actually.
Which Mr. Obama would not include lethal aid.
Right. President Obama was wrong.
I think he was dead wrong about that.
Because he did not want to, provoke, get the Russians to.
I thought it was Trump who didn't want to provoke the Russians.
Yeah.
It turns out it was Obama
he didn't
too.
want to provoke. So the aid he had was non-lethal aid.
Right.
Okay, he was giving them aid. The idea was, well, if I give you something to help your economy, then the people are not going to, be sympathetic to the Russians.
But that's with the shooting war going on.
Right.
It's nice to talk about the
Yeah,
economy.
but it has changed, and it's not just President Trump, it's both parties in the
Right.
Congress have said, hey, wait a second, this is getting worse, we've got to do something. And so basically they passed this aid package.
Was it a couple $1 billion?
It was 400.
Just 400 million. That's not a lot of
400
money.
million. That's a lot of money for Ukraine, okay?
Okay.
I mean, no, it's a lot, it's a lot. And it was both military and diplomatic or, foreign aid, economic aid. And then, of course, what happened is the president tried to use this as a lever to get the Ukrainians
Get some dirt on it.
to do something which is, and this is what the Congress is going to decide, whether it's, something that's worthy of impeachment. But the real question is here, it undermines our national security, because by not giving it to them, the Russians can say, well, is Trump going to do this again? And it delayed, it was delayed by at least 3 months. No telling what could have happened,
Right.
in the interim.
But the signal is to the Russians, oh, so the Americans aren't all that serious about following through on this, are they?
Right.
But here's my question to you. Why is it the Russians can't knock off the Ukrainians and just take it?
Well, basically,
I mean, the idea that the Ukrainians are at a stalemate with a Russian enhanced or a partial Russian force baffles me a bit.
well, the cost would be prohibitive, because even though there are some people in Ukraine who are sympathetic to Russia, the majority of the people are not. And so if they were to go in, and there would be a very difficult war, you could have an insurgency, and the Russians have financial problems. Their economy is not doing well. The life expectancy is declining, the population is declining, so they're in a situation where they have to be very, very, very careful. I mean,
Same time, there's under some political pressure. There are people who are feeling like they've become a secondary force in the world, and they've lost some of that old glamour.
Well,
they'd like to have some of that back.
well, they are, but the majority of the people are not. When they send people like into Syria, for example, and they don't even report the casualties back home if any Russians die,
Yeah.
because of the
Right.
popular opinion. I think the majority of Russians want to be treated with respect. They
want food
feel
on the
they're
table.
great people, but I don't think that they want to reestablish the former Soviet Union, because they recognize the cost of having to.
I was
do
just
that.
curious about that. Without knowing a great deal about it, obviously I don't.
Well, I mean,
Really, the Russians can't knock off the Ukrainians? Really?
see, we made a terrible mistake, and I remember testifying against this back in the 90s, and it wasn't popular. Don't expand NATO, because NATO was an anti-Soviet alliance.
Right.
And by bringing in all the Eastern European countries, and then the Baltic countries, which are right on the, you basically sent a message that we may come in and conquer you. Now, I don't think we will.
Well, at a minimum, we're going to put a really good chokehold on you.
Yeah, and you're going to have American troops on the border.
Every one of your borders.
Right.
Right.
And so it really wasn't necessary, but it wasn't, and it wasn't just the neocons of the Clinton administration
Right.
embraced it and everything like that. But I remember at testifying, and George Kennan, the father of containment, said, don't do it. It really is not,
Right. I remember that.
yeah, and I can remember Tom Friedman of the New York Times writing, a very astute observer of international, politics being opposed to it. You had a whole group, you had something like 100 former government officials who came out against it, but, it was, and the Russians felt that it would more or less imply.
We were on a roll when there was an
Yeah,
opportunity.
and the Russians also felt that they were told, at least implicitly, if you allow Germany to unify, that'll be it.
I thought that might be the case. So Ukraine, outlook?
Well, I think basically if we keep giving them the foreign aid, I don't think the Russians are going to come in. As I say, I think there are a lot of reasons.
Not full force.
No, I mean, they could try and, undermine, do the elections as they know how to. But, they didn't get, their candidate didn't win this last election. Zelensky's not their guy.
Right, no, that's true. That's true. I'm going to skip by the impeachment thing. I have one question I'm dying to ask you, but let me see what we'll get. Afghanistan, where are we in Afghanistan?
Well,
We had this almost deal. You thought we had a deal with the Taliban, that Trump had a deal with the Taliban. And then he got spooked at the last minute.
well, it
And
was
he-
his
and
own
he-
fault. He should have allowed the negotiations to go on over there. But he wanted to take credit. I'm going to invite them to Camp David, and then, of course,
He wanted it to be his deal, didn't he?
that his deal. I
Right.
mean, and the idea that the Taliban were going to stop fighting because they were on their way to Camp David, and of course, the people who didn't like the deal when they killed an American,
They
the
made a cause
optics
celebre
would have
that.
been bad for him. But, you don't invite the Taliban to Camp David, for heaven's sakes. Okay, you would go in the negotiations over in Qatar with Ambassador Khalil Zad, who happens to be a native, of Afghanistan working, and you would have got a deal. Would it have been a perfect deal? No. But the fact of the matter is,
It's Afghanistan, folks. Has anybody ever gotten a perfect deal?
and the thing is that basically we've accomplished our objective. The Taliban are not, they're not going to allow these ISIS, groups. In fact, they're killing some of the ISIS people who come in there.
So far.
And we went in there to get rid of the Taliban because we told them, if you turn over bin Laden, we'll leave you alone. And they said no, so we went in and, we got rid of them. But the idea that we're going to spend American blood and treasure to create a democratic government in Afghanistan is just, I don't know if I ever
Not
told
in
you.
your lifetime or mine, Larry.
In 2011, I was asked to go back to Afghanistan by Brahimi, the guy who did the Bonn conference, who set it up with a group. And the last night we were there, we met with the Taliban's #2 guy. Because this is when Obama was going to take the troops out, the surge that he had. And I said, okay, if you come back and you control certain parts of the country, how will you treat women? Because they obviously, and he said, don't worry, we won't be any worse than the Saudis. And
Not a bad answer.
I mean, the other people, but that's what I mean. So, no, we gotta end it, okay? And this idea where you can just stay forever and keep fighting, no, I mean, you basically, and that's why now I don't know if we can get the peace negotiations back on track again,
All the blown opportunities, it's hard to imagine. And between Obama, frankly, and Trump and Syria, is that wrapping up? Are we moving towards a close there?
Well,
with the help of the Russians, I should add?
yeah, well, what's happened is Assad is going to stay in power.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's...
And with Russian and Iranian help. The real problem we just had was that we were in there not to get rid of Assad. We were trying to undermine the caliphate of ISIS. In other words, they had set up...
Wait a minute, the Civil War was underway before
well
the
before
caliphate.
this, yeah. Okay. What happened was, back in 2011 is when the rebellion started.
Right.
Okay.
God, it's that long. Yeah.
Okay. In 2014, ISIS, or Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which transformed itself into ISIS, Baghdadi, a guy we had put in prison, radicalized, he got up a movement. The Iraqi government didn't fight because they didn't get, their government doesn't have the support of the people. So when ISIS came in Mosul and places, they all retreated.
Precious little
So we
opposition.
went back in, basically, to protect the people there from ISIS. We fought with the Iraqis and the Iranians, by the way, to drive ISIS out of Iraq and then drive them out of Syria. We did not want to send young Americans there again, given our experience in Iraq.
Right.
So we partnered with the Kurds because we had saved a lot of Kurds from ISIS when we went in, okay? They called the Syrian Democratic Forces. And we destroyed the caliphate.
They've also given the Kurds some reason for help in Iraq.
Well, when we went in, we went to protect the Kurds from ISIS when
Right.
we went in, and we provided mainly air power and a small number of ground troops. Okay, so we destroyed the caliphate in Raqqa
Iraq.
and Kobani, which was their, Raqqa was their capital, and so the caliphate.
Iraq is in Syria. we cleansed them out of Iraq. And
Right,
we
they
got
were
them
in
down
Mosul,
to,
yeah, we got,
Right.
so we destroyed the caliphate. What happened then was that President Erdogan calls Trump and said, okay, you destroyed the caliphate, now get out, because, you know, we're going to come in and set up a buffer zone to keep, and the Syrian
kill
Democratic,
as many Kurds as we can.
right,
I mean, that's the nature of the relationship between the Erdogan government and Kurds.
well, the Kurds, some part, what they call the PKK.
Well, that's right. The Kurd thing is a little more complicated.
Right.
There are at least three.
Right, okay. The ones we helped are called the YPG. The PKK Kurds try to overthrow Erdogan. So he,
In Turkey.
yes, they try to foment a
And the
rebellion.
YPG is Kurds in Syria.
Right, those are the ones we're helping.
And then you've got the Kurdistan part of Iraq.
Right, that's right.
Right,
The
okay.
Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the world without their own country.
Yeah, and
Those-
they're split between these countries.
Yeah. But anyway, so basically he got the phone call. He said, okay, we'll leave. And of course, the Kurds then, you know, Erdogan was going to come in and they're saying, wait a second, we lost 11,000 people fighting with you to beat ISIS. You're going to just walk
So
out.
you could
with-
lose 23 people while we were losing 11,000.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've forgotten the exact number.
Well,
but
we only lost 5.
five. I'm sorry, 23 was much higher than we
Yeah,
actually
5.
lost.
No, we lost 5.
The Kurds had saved a lot of American lives as a practical
Right,
matter.
because by defeating ISIS,
Right.
basically, if they had gotten the caliphate, they would have been able to get money, they got the oil stuff, and they
Or
been
we
able-
would have had to take them on loan.
Yeah.
Let's say, assume a best case, we would have had to take them on loan. We would have lost a lot more troops.
Right, and, you know, they basically could have attacks all over the world if they maintained their calaphate. A lot
Right.
of people wanted to join. And,
They had a huge base and
Right. So, and you know, the interesting thing, if you take a look at Syria, and about a year ago, Trump said, let's get out of Syria when we had destroyed the caliphate. And Mattis, who's then the Secretary of Defense, said, no, you can't do it. So Trump said, I'm going to do it anyway. So Mattis quit. Then we had 2,000.
I think that was the final straw. I think Mattis,
Yeah,
there were a lot of reasons for
Oh, yes.
Mattis, who was a pretty competent.
Right, yeah. If you read Commander Snodgrass, his speechwriter, has a terrific book out about that. Mattis publicly won't do anything. So basically, we left 1,000 in, so things were still going okay. Then, of course, the phone call was, Trump says we're going to get out again.
One phone call, Erdogan, Trump's got investments, or his family's got investments in Turkey, and, oh, sure. How important can the Kurds be?
Yeah, and then when basically you saw the war crimes, the ISIS people getting out of prison and everything like that, then Trump said, no, I'm going to leave some there, and basically it won't be to fight ISIS, it'll be to protect the oil.
Whose oil is this?
It's Syria's oil, but it's the worst of all possible worlds.
And we're going to protect it for whom?
Supposedly keeping it from ISIS.
And who gets to use it?
Well, Trump is saying we will, to pay for all we've done there. It's the worst
We're
of
going to be
all
taking out
possible,
Syrian oil?
worst of all possible worlds.
Listen to this, folks.
Because a lot of people who join these radical groups that are anti-West and anti-U.S. say, all we care about is the oil. So this reinforces the narrative. We don't need the oil.
Oh, and where does he get off thinking we can do that? But there you go.
So anyway, now we got from about 1,000, between 600 and 700 still there, and the mission is not clear.
Now, are these the guys who took out al-Baghdadi? No.
The Kurds gave us the information, yes, and the guys who took out Baghdadi were in Iraq.
They were this.
Yeah, but-
were they? They were special forces from Iraq.
Yeah. We still have 5,000 troops.
Okay,
in
they
Iraq.
weren't the Syrian guys. The guys in Syria.
What?
They weren't our guys in
No,
Syria.
no. But here's what I tell you, what's really annoyed me.
Important distinction, though, because
Yeah.
people think, oh, wasn't it good that President Trump left those guys there? Nothing to do with it.
No. But here's what's horrible. The Kurds gave us the information on Baghdadi, all right, the head of ISIS. We have an air base in Incirlik in Turkey, which is right near where Baghdadi was. The Turks wouldn't let us use that base, so we had to fly from Iraq and it was a long distance. Fortunately, none of the helicopters got shot down. But can you imagine what would have happened if the special force, was right there, and they wouldn't let us use it? So, theoretically,
Isn't this the fellow Erdogan? Didn't he just come to the White House, have a special greeting?
yes, he
and
came last week.
Spent time with this fine fellow in the White
Oh,
House?
yeah. And brought back a letter Trump had sent him saying, if you don't stop this, we're going to put sanctions on. Gave it back like, here you go, I'm not going to ignore you.
Oh, he gave it back to him? Because I heard he threw it in the trash can. Oh, he had a copy.
Yeah, I mean, and as I say, this it gives us the worst of all possible worlds there. We were able to, you can say, well, we shouldn't have gone to Iraq. Well, we did it. So there
Yeah.
was things that, as a result of that led to ISIS. So you work with the Kurds to, get rid of ISIS at a comparatively small cost.
Right. No, I would say we owe the Kurds a great deal, because if they had not made that sacrifice, those would have been our guys getting killed.
That's right.
I mean, this is not, and I gather there's been great upset in the military about this.
Oh, well.
They did not want to betray these guys. They thought, because these were guys fighting in the battlefield.
With them.
They knew
with
it.
them, yes, yeah.
They
And
knew that these
yeah,
guys had
yeah,
sacrificed for them.
And they were like brothers in arms.
Yeah. Well, they were, in fact. I'm not going to even get into the Saudis. North Korea, speaking of guy going and having a special meeting so he can be the one that brings you a deal. Here we go. This is a country that's, I guess, the worst of the worst on the planet, the most unreliable, the cruelest to their people, and now they're developing the nuclear capability at there's some stage.
No, they've already got a nuclear capability.
I'm sorry, they have
Yeah.
nuclear. They're more developing an ability to deliver
That's right, yes.
nuclear.
Now, we're basically, President Trump,
Well, let's start with, what is the state of play as you and I are conversing today? Because we know he went to North Korea to make friends with Kim Jong-un.
right, he went over the demilitarized
Expressed
line. yeah.
thanks for the love letters at one point. I'm not exaggerating, that's what he said, from Kim Jong-un. Where are we today? And then you may have to fill this in.
Okay, by the end of the year, we're supposed to meet with the North Koreans again to pick up where we left off.
There have been some negotiations going on, presumably at working levels?
Right, yes. In other words, will we relieve some sanctions if they stop testing? I mean, a whole bunch of other things.
We have now recontinued the exercises with the South Koreans.
We've cut the exercises. We've got a real problem, I tell you. First of all, we stopped the exercises because...
These are joint exercises with the South Koreans that the North Koreans took great offense at.
Right, yes. They said, well, you got to stop them. So we have, but we haven't gotten anything.
Trump decided, okay, stop them, without even telling or consulting with the military first.
Or the South Koreans.
Or the South Koreans.
Yeah. We got the worst of all possible worlds because we've done that. The South Koreans and the Japanese are going at it again, and they've cut off, intelligence, sharing.
What are they going at it about?
They're still back to the history when the Japanese occupied Korea and the comfort women and all.
Oh my God, that's
Oh, yeah.
still alive.
Yes. You
It
still.
was a horrible thing, I don't mean to
No,
understate it,
but they stopped sharing intelligence, which is, not.
No love lost between the Koreans and the Japanese.
Yeah, and basically then Trump has compounded it. He wants the South Koreans to increase the amount that they spend for our troops there, which is like $900 million now, to $5 billion. That's nowhere near what it cost us to keep those troops there. And this whole idea of where did he get that number? The South Koreans said, we could see going from 900 million to maybe $1 billion or something, but to 5 billion? I mean, when President Trump came in, it was like 400 million that they were paying. And so this whole idea, unless you do that, we're going to get out. Well, the North Koreans are just sitting there and say, well, that's good.
Okay, no hurry to be going to meetings and stuff like that. Let's get back working on that missile, yeah. And they are working on missiles. Their delivery capability is...
Yes.
They can reach most of their neighbors now without any problem.
That's right, yeah, they can. They fire missiles over Japan when they test and everything like that.
That scares the heck out of the Japanese. They haven't got anything to hit us yet, but that too will come, I assume.
Well, the question is, can they reach Guam? which is where we have forces.
Okinawa?
Okinawa, yeah.
And what's the outlook?
Well, the outlook is not good because the president's unrealistic in dealing with the North Koreans. Okay, if you're in North
But I
Korea now,
thought he
you're
and
going
Kim Jong-un had an eye-to-eye,
well, yeah, he did.
hand-to-hand.
Yeah. The interesting thing is when he meant to meet him, Bolton was sent to Mongolia. So
That was funny. Who leaked that? I assumed that was coming out of the White House.
So, but the fact of the matter is,
He didn't take his national security advisor with him to North Korea, or that Bolton was sent off to Mongolia. To my knowledge, we have no pressing national security
Not that I
things
know.
going on in Mongolia. Okay, I thought maybe
But-
I'd missed something.
but the fact of the matter is, the North Koreans are continuing to develop. We basically have not been able to stop them with anything we've done. The president has, if I'm North Korea, say, well, how much longer does he have in office? Am I going to make a deal now? And when we get back to the table, the question really becomes how far along will they be and what's our bargaining position? But they've gotten everything they wanted. No exercises,
World recognition?
Yeah. And so the fact of the matter is that the president thought that he, like all of his predecessors, unlike all of his predecessors, could get a great deal, and not recognizing, the ramifications and the complexities. And it's not that.
Do you remember one part of what he said? It's Donald Trump, so I have to remember this, because I would never have thought of this with any other president, because it was never there with any other president. One of his things with Kim Jong-un was, you've got this marvelous coast,
Right.
I see beach resorts, and I expected he was going to say, and Trump hotels,
Right.
and that was part of why this would come. All of a sudden, it would be the economy of North Korea would change dramatically. All these foreign funds would be flowing in there. He'd have a few hotels.
Right, yeah.
I never forgot that being part of his approach.
The idea that the North Koreans have the same values that he does.
Yeah, if you look around North Korea a little bit, I don't think you're going to find many resorts. For example, in
No.
any case.
I mean, that's what I mean. It's very unrealistic, And if you go back and you look
Okay, and
at-
he's facing an impeachment inquiry. He's facing, at best case, a tough re-election outlook for next year. I think Nancy Pelosi's going to blow the impeachment thing. No question in my mind. She threw out what happened with the Mueller report, says that never happened, all that work that had been done. She's going down this narrow little alley of the Ukrainian thing. It ain't going to happen. But he's got that facing him. He's out of office if he doesn't win re-election next year. Why should the North Koreans do anything before January of 2021? I mean,
Right, well, they're supposed to do some before this January, but your point is well taken. Why? Because they've canceled the exercises, they've annoyed the South Koreans by wanting more money, and the Japanese and South Koreans are not getting along with each other. They're winning.
So, yeah, why should that? Well, I don't hear Trump mentioning North Korea anymore either.
No.
It's off his radar even. Last thing I'm going to mention to you, because they're going to tell us we're going to be out of time eventually here. Climate change, the Paris Accords. And this isn't really that directly in your field. You're more of a national defense, national security guy. But, this is an area that even the Defense Department's become, has incorporated into its planning and its thinking for the future, because they recognize that it's a reality, even if a lot of Republicans do not. Any comments on the outlook?
Well, the fact of the matter is that if there is a different president or Trump wants to, they can get back into the Paris Climate Accords.
Oh, what did I see in the paper the other day, that the actual termination date would be like January 21st of 2021?
Yes.
The first day, that's not
Not an accident.
coincidence. Of a new presidency or second term of Donald Trump, God
Right,
help us.
yeah.
So we actually have until that date when the cord would be cut permanently, in fact. Is that correct?
But, again, that's more symbolic. What that says is people recognize around the world the problems that climate change can cause, both from a humanitarian and a strategic viewpoint. The real question is, what are you doing at home here? You know, changing the mileage standards on automobiles, you know, trying to get back to fossil
Lowering the
fuels.
mileage standards,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, you know, but you're right, the Pentagon is worried because if you got climate change in countries, that can lead to instability in the area,
Yeah.
and not only their bases, all our bases are on the coast,
Right.
you know, so.
And between now and 2050, the outlook for the coast is not very good.
No.
And when I say coast, I mean around the world, and in some places in particular, like Virginia,
That's right.
where we happen to have major
Right down
bases
in the
and a
Norfolk,
big
in the
clump.
Norfolk area,
Norfolk and
and down
Virginia
in,
Beach, yeah.
and in Florida, and you know, we saw what happened with the storms. We have a lot of forces in Puerto Rico. So-
Yeah. So a real concern. Any other topics I've left out of this obvious agenda?
Well, I think the one thing that's important here is our relation with China, because China is developing its military capabilities, and the real question is, how do you deal with China?
And
Now,
their scientifically and technological capabilities.
we made a terrible mistake, or Trump did, as the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Because if we had gotten in there, we'd have had all the countries in the region working with us to prevent the Chinese from, you know.
And what are they doing in our absence?
Well, they're trying to work together, but without us, it's not really as.
Well, it means they're having to make some deals with the Chinese.
That's right, yeah, we don't have the leverage.
Because Trump walked away from the game.
Right, yeah.
I used to think Trans-Pacific Partnership was a bad idea. It turns
Well,
out,
it was
we had a lot
almost
of.
like anything Obama did was a bad idea, you know.
But it turns out there was a significant loss of our relationships and our security in Asia as a result of
Oh,
not
yeah,
going forward with
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
a serious matter. Donald Trump likes to portray himself as the big tough guy in the world stage, but from a national security standpoint, he's been a disaster area.
Well, the only thing he's done from a national security thing is he's put a lot more money into the Pentagon. Now, he hadn't paid for it, which will have some problems, but he has increased defense spending, and the military is able to, proving their readiness standards and buy more, you know, equipment. And he talks a lot about that.
Look at the Asia and the Pacific, the Trans-Pacific Partnership loan, the security
Oh, yeah.
implications of that, the security implications of what's going on in the Ukraine, the security of the Middle East.
Oh,
Would
look
you
what
say
he
that's
says
more
about
secure?
NATO. You know, he
NATO.
says, yeah, those people aren't paying their fair share, and we're going to get out. And
But I'm asking you as a national security expert, are we in better shape after
Oh, no.
3 years of Donald Trump?
no,
I don't think
we're
so.
in much worse shape. And
And-
hopefully, it can be repaired. You know, we hope if President Trump were to get reelected, he would then realize that, you know, he don't have to worry about reelection again, and he can focus on these things, maybe bring in.
You're saying there's a Donald Trump in there that we didn't know about, we haven't found out about
I
yet?
got to be hopeful and stay out of politics, but I think if you get another administration, I think some of the damage will be impossible to undo. Because a lot of people around the world, when I deal with them, they say, you know, there's a lot of people in this country that really feel like that, you know, against NATO and all it, and we're taken advantage of by the rest of the world, and so, you know, would the next president, whoever she or he may be, will they be able to control that?
Yeah, there's that populist thing, that America First thing that is definitely still out there. Larry, I want to thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you.
Being here this special
I'm sorry
day.
to hear that the show is ending, but thanks for having me all these times.
Well, I thank Comcast and Dan Nicholson and company for a good long ride here, a long show. I think we've accomplished a lot, and it's thanks more to their efforts. But thanks for what you do at the Center for American Progress, and thanks for all you've done for Reston in several respects. But coming out here and joining me and giving our audience the benefit of your extensive experience on a topic I don't think we talk about as much as we should sometimes. Thanks to Dan Nicholson, Ruben Nahara at Comcast for bringing the program to you all tonight, but for doing it for 18 years. It's been a great ride, and I thank you all very much. And God help you people out there looking at your TV sets. I hope we provided some information for you that was useful. I know that hearing from a guy like Larry Korb is useful because he's just got so much to offer. Thanks a lot, And we'll see you down the road somewhere.